Good evening, everyone. This is Professor York, and this is the first in a four-part series that deals with the elements of a good marketing plan. I know that you all have had an opportunity to be introduced or work on a marketing plan, but I want to get into some of the details that will help you with your deliverable of a marketing plan for 454, or maybe gain some insights that will help with your deliverables for your clients. So this video is going to focus on the situational analysis, but this is the first of four pieces because I want to make sure that each piece I spend enough time, but I don't put you to sleep. So the bottom line is, for this first one, what I want you to take away is a good situation lays out the path for a solid business plan. You need to understand what's going on. So let's come back to the concept of what most businesses do. And what most businesses do is they're on a fishing expedition. Good marketers make their money because they know who they want to market to, they know their position in the market, they know their competition, they know their value proposition, they know how to communicate it. And that's what we're going to try to make sure in our business plan that is communicated. So I think that what I find many times is many marketers are very tactical. So I'm going to put forth here. Let's talk the marketing plan. And the marketing plan is really about plan the work first and then work the plan. Okay? Plan the work, work the plan. And these are the pieces that comprise the marketing plan. We have the situational analysis, objective setting, strategy, and then the tactics, and I tie in there budgets and metrics. Now, there are content within this presentation that those who've been 454 in this first class have been exposed to. However, I've added some really, really good pieces in. So it might be worthwhile if you're wanting to learn a little bit about market sizing, if you want to learn a little more detail around the competitive environment, you might want to make sure you go through this because this is going to add, I think, to your toolbox. So let's talk situation analysis. Okay? So in the beginning, a good plan starts with a really good situation analysis. We need to know where we're at before we can start forward into setting objectives, defining strategy, and then ultimately the tactics that follow. So you've seen this blueprint beforehand for a situation analysis. I had the circular diagram, but basically we're going to talk market opportunity, market you're in, state of the business, customer analysis, job to be done, competitive analysis, SWOT, and 5 forces. Whoa, lots of stuff. But you know what? You get a handle on these pieces and you understand the business. You become invaluable to your team if you work in corporate and to your client if you are a consultant. So let's first talk about market opportunity. Those who take my Business 310 class understand the concept of what we call TAM, SAM, SOM. Okay, what does that mean? TAM being the total addressable market, SAM being the serviceable addressable market, and SOM being the serviceable obtainable market. Okay, these are the customers that you can attract as active users and customers, or what we call your target market, versus the whole universe of potential. And we're going to come back to this actually with a really good example at the end of objective setting. So I don't want to spoil that, but I want you to start thinking in these segments because what you need to communicate is Is this market big? How big is it? Where are the changes going on? Is it growing? Is it declining? Because it helps you frame, and that's important, is framing in terms of where you're going to go in attacking that market, strategically and tactically. So when we size a market, so you'll hear this term called market modeling, and there's two ways that you can model a market. Either you can do a top-down or bottom-up. A top-down is if you, and I don't know whether you have done this in your secondary market research classes, but there are good sources you can get from industry reports, market research reports, competitive press releases, university libraries, and just talking to investors and customers. That gives you a top-down feel. On the other hand, there's a bottom-up feel, which is based on epidemiologic information, user trends, adjacent markets, and analysis of these data and conversion to pull them in together for a market sizing. So I'm going to give you a few examples. Here's a top-down, and this is in virtual reality, which is really a big growing field, and this is actually a consulting project that I'm getting involved with down at UC San Diego, which is to look at, what the opportunity. You can see the forecasts are great. And the same thing is if you look at the area of personalized medicine, which is lab testing services and targeted treatments, see that from a global vantage. So with commercial reports, you get sort of a top-down view. And then what you do is you segment down the data into a specific market that you feel that your company can reasonably obtain. And here's an example. So over the summertime, I had one of my my interns or work with me, and we were working with a startup that is focusing in on neovascular indications. What you need to know is there are certain deficits, problems that occur in the eye that are due to the blood vessels. It could be in the front of the eye, which is like the cornea. It could be in the back of the eye, and particularly if you have diabetes. Or it could be in certain other parts in the middle of the eye, which may affect pressure. And what we do is we have these three pieces, the TAM, the SAM, the SOM. And what that gives you a sense is, and this is done in terms of market size of individual patients, is are we talking about a small market, which may be 1.4 million, to a very, very large market, okay? So that's what we're trying to get at. So, for instance, neovascular glaucoma space is very small. Well, strategically, we can use that to our advantage because from a development vantage point, we may be able to go after what we call an orphan drug indication. Or if we want a large and robust market, we can go after the diabetic retinopathy marketplace, which is a very, very large, and this is where a lot of companies are going at. Or if we want to be unique, we can go into the corneal neovascular, which is still robust. The bottom line is company management and investors want to know, is this a market large enough that I can get into? Here's another example. We did a few years ago with Genentech, and we were looking at metastatic breast cancer. We're looking at naive, which is the first occurrence of the breast cancer, recurrent, which is a recurrence of that disease. And what we did was we looked at yearly costs of individual agents that are involved with the treatment. And then what we were able to do is tie in that with certain drivers to be able, based on the combinations of these drugs, number of patients that are there we estimated, is to be able to provide an estimated market. Okay? So this is another way of building your marketplace based on certain segments. And here we have a classic example of segmentation approach that we combined into one marketplace, which is not a small market. And this is on a dollar size standpoint. And the data that comes from is from IMS, which is a very reputable source for market data for pharmaceutical and biotech products. And just a side here on the side is, as we put together a model, we start thinking about certain drivers. So as you build a market, you have to think about what drives the market. It could be the price of the regimen. It could be how many times it's being used on an annual basis, which would be the number of cycles that are being done in an annual. What's your market share as we look at the other drugs that are there? And then probably most importantly is the number of patients. So these are different factors. We'll come back to this in terms of goal setting later on, but this is something to understand. You want to be able to size a market because what you want to communicate is this is big enough that you want to be playing in this market. Speaking of type of, market size, you want to also think about type of market you are in. Is it established? Is it, which we know is established, where you're playing gain share? We talked about this in the previous video. But it may be totally new. You're the first in. You're creating a market. You're ultimately educating and developing that market that you may get initial early adopters in, and you may see an inflection point after educating the market at year 4. Resegment might be a niche play that you take a segment out of your established market you're going to play at. You may do something that is, for a better word, like what Airbnb does, which is that you disrupt the market. And then there's clone market, where you take the market you have in the US, you move it to another country, and you clone that approach and market. The cell phone industry is one good example back in the 1990s. So the state of the business is the second piece that you want to think about, which is you have to start thinking about how's the business doing, but what are the internal factors, what are the external factors? So we talked about this in terms of internal factors, in terms of the company and present business. We talked about the company, focus and management, the business it's in, the present business, and this is very critical, which is present volume and sales, but what are the trends? Up, down, relative growth. This is where is going to drive things. And any major changes happening in the business. And there are a variety of things that could drive internally and externally. And then also future business. What products are at the end of the life cycle? What products are to be launched? And are there any major changes that be happening in the business? Bottom line, as you look at company and business, and present business, you have to ask, is it healthy or not? And then there is what we call the environmental scan. So on the right-hand side, you can see a variety of factors that you need to consider as part of that scan. From economy, regulatory, political, competitive, demographic, business model, global. Trends that are favoring versus trends that are hindering. You need to understand your environment. A bad economy can just wreak havoc on a business. A very tight regulatory political environment could really do just terrible things. A heavy competitive marketplace, you need to think about. If you have 20 competitors, that's a space you want to be in. You have new competitors coming in. You have changing demographics that favor your marketplace. And goes on and on. And as we also talked about, is your customer. And this is very important. And what we have to think about our customer is in two ways. One is, and I've talked to you guys about, what does that customer look like? What is the archetype of persona? And then the second piece that's there is, what is the role in the buying process? Okay? And what do you mean by that? Well, here in this example, you may have several different customers. You may have somebody who is going to be actually buying the product, and that may be, in benefiting the product, but you may have a decision maker. You may have someone who has influenced the process here. You may have recommenders. You may have somebody who may be detracting away. So you need to understand the roles in the dynamic of the selling and buying process and the profiles of these different customers. So, at the end of the day, I think if you understand one or two key customers and what they look like versus I have a population from women 20 to 50 years of age, we all know that's very diverse and we need to segment down. So why is this important? And I'll use this example from a business plan we did for a client, Genentech. Is that different customers play a role in the purchase process. Now, this looks a little complicated. Let me break it down. Is that on the top line, we have and strategically you see the push and you see the pull. So on the top line, you have certain players that play a role in terms of influencing the push process, which means loading a drug into a formula, getting it covered by a formula. And you may have some folks that may not support it or play a role. So you need to understand the role of these different players just in that strategic piece. And then there's the pull, where we have certain customers, and most notably the patient advocacy groups and specialists that are going to be creating demand. So we need to keep that in mind. And that's really the bottom line point. And following from that, understanding these customers, we need to understand from the profile what the gains, the pains, and the job to be done. That's on the right side, the customer profile. And you have to translate to your product and saying, what is our product creating in terms of gain? How's it relieving pain? And, what is that product? Is it physical, intangible, digital, or financial? So just keep that in mind in terms of what we call, this is the value proposition canvas, but it helps you understand what are you doing for the customer, because this is what's going to drive purchase behavior. In addition, take it one step further, Bain & Company, what they've defined out is, what are the needs you're trying to fulfill? So, as you can see, there are 4 different categories: social, life-changing, emotional, and functional. And in essence, I love this because it really hones into the job to be done. Okay, you're creating a value by relieving a pain or solving a problem or creating gain. I'm going to now segue into, we talked about job to be done, customer, is to talk about your competition. And so there are different ways of looking at competition here. This is one way of doing this, and a very nice way of displaying in terms of based on your players that are in the marketplace and the benefits or the features of your products. Another way may be in a 2x2, looking at maybe 2 key benefits and then laying it out in a 2x2 matrix to come back and say, this is where these players play based on these two parameters, feedback and adjustability, as two key, I'm going to say, benefits versus your product. Or something that we've used is just a pro-con. Here's the product, here's the pros, the cons, price, and indication. The bottom line is you really need to have a good fix on how your competitors stack up to you and how you stack up versus them. Which sort of translates to your SWOT analysis, because you need to understand your internal factors. And this is a unique SWOT analysis. Most people look at the 2x2. This is actually a 9-box SWOT analysis because we add in strategies. But we can look on the y-axis, the internal factors, your strengths and weaknesses, which is more internal to the product company, versus external opportunities and threats, which are outside the company. And then to be able to blend those factors together and look at strategies that you use, strengths to leverage opportunities, or strategies to leverage opportunities to minimize weaknesses, or to use strengths to prevent threats, or strategies to minimize dangers of threats when you have weaknesses. So it's a really good take on SWOT analysis, and I think it takes it to the next level than most corporations do. They just do the old 2x2 box, which I think we can do a better job. Taking it to the next level, and I'll close it out here, is on Michael Porter's 5 forces. So you're going, well, who's Michael Porter? Michael Porter is probably one of the foremost, greatest strategic minds in business. And Professor Porter out of Harvard has put forth great pieces on strategy, but one of them is the 5 forces. And it's a piece that we've brought in to our marketing plan situation analysis. Why? Because it gets you to think about not just the middle, which is the rivalry among competitors, but the other players, those who are new entrants, which could be competitors that are coming in the future that have maybe something a little bit different or new, especially if you have low barriers of entry, which gets you asking about what are your barriers of entry. And those could be in terms of capitalization, it could be regulatory, etc. 2, the threat of substitute products. Wine gets too expensive. Oh, craft beer might be another beverage to consider at half the price to satisfy my beverage need when I'm having dinner, especially nice dinner. You impact the suppliers because your supply chain is so critical. And last but not least is the bargaining power of your buyers. And we've seen this particularly in the healthcare space. We see it all over the place. Buyers are constantly bargaining with you and leveraging present competitors and substitute products versus your value proposition. Well, that's it here for now. Our next presentation next video we'll talk about objective setting. So stay tuned, but hopefully you took away some key things to start about laying the proper foundation so you could build a path towards why you're taking a certain strategy and what tactics you will take to achieve your objectives and how you will measure them. So thanks for your time. Have a good evening.